The tall glass towers of New Kythera shook as explosions lit up the sky. Red light from 3 dying suns cast long shadows across the Crystal City. Commander Veltar's see-through hands trembled as he reached for the communication panel. His body was made of living crystal, and right now it was blinking with fear and panic. "This is a Kytherian Federation, calling anyone who can hear us." Veltar spoke into microphone, his voice bouncing off the empty walls of control room. Outside, he could see smoke rising from the outer districts. "We are all that's left. The Vrek swarm has eaten up 17 of our planets. Now they're coming for us. Please, if anyone gets this message, we have families here. We have little children." His voice cracked at the end. Through the massive windows of the command center, he could see the dark shapes moving between the stars. The Vrek ships looked like giant insects, all sharp edges and pulsing with sick green light. They had been hunting his people for 3 years now, moving from world to world like locusts. Veltar had been a teacher before the war started. He taught young Kytherian children about the stars and the peaceful races that lived among them. Now he was the last military commander of his entire species, and he didn't know the first thing about fighting a war. Meanwhile, very far away in space, Captain James Mitchell was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee in control room of the UNSC Defiance. The human ship was small compared to the massive vessels other alien races used, but it was tough. It had to be. Humans built their ships to survive in the harsh emptiness of space, just like they had learned to survive on their dangerous home planet. Mitchell was a man in his 50s with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of space travel. He had been exploring the galaxy for the human government, making maps of new star systems and trying to figure out where humanity fit in this vast universe full of aliens. Most alien species thought humans were primitive and dangerous. They called Earth a death world because it was so violent and unpredictable compared to their peaceful planets. The bridge of the Defiance was cramped and noisy. Unlike the smooth, quiet ships of other races, human vessels were full of buttons, switches, and blinking lights. Everything was built to be fixed quickly when it broke, because in space, things broke all the time. "Sir," called out Communications Officer Lisa Parker, a young woman with short brown hair who had joined the space program straight out of college. She was staring at her screen with a confused look. "We're picking up something weird on the emergency channels. It sounds like someone asking for help." The signal was weak and full of static. Their receivers were basic compared to what advanced alien civilizations used, but they worked. Mitchell put down his coffee and walked over to Lisa's station. "Let me hear it," he said. The voice that came through the speakers was strange and musical, but the desperation in it was something any human could understand. Even through the language translator, they could hear the fear. "This is a Kytherian Federation broadcasting on all frequencies. We are the last. The Vrek swarm has consumed 17 of our worlds. They come for us now. Please, anyone who receives this, we have children here." Mitchell felt something cold settle in his stomach. Around the bridge, his crew had stopped what they were doing to listen. Lieutenant Robert Hayes, the ship's tactical officer, was a practical man who always thought about resources and orders. "Captain," Hayes said carefully, "we barely have enough ships to protect our own colonies. Command won't authorize a rescue mission to unknown space." Mitchell stared at the star charts on the main screen. The signal was coming from a sector that was marked with warning symbols. Most alien races had labeled that area as dangerous and off-limits. But someone was dying, and they were calling for help. "Command doesn't need to know about this yet," Mitchell said quietly. His crew looked at him with surprise. "Lisa, how many people are we talking about?" Lisa's fingers moved quickly over her keyboard as she tried to decode more of the transmission. What she found made her face turn white. "Millions, sir. Maybe tens of millions. And something called the Vrek swarm is hunting them down." The bridge went silent, except for the hum of the ship's engines. Everyone knew what this meant. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization was about to be wiped out, and they had sent out one last desperate call for help before they died. Mitchell looked around at his crew. These were good people who had signed up to explore space and represent humanity among the stars. None of them had expected to face a choice like this. "Sir," Hayes said again, more gently this time, Even if we wanted to help, what could we do? One small ship against something that's destroyed 17 worlds. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally, he turned back to the communication station. Lisa sent a response. Tell them help is coming. Admiral Catherine Stone walked into the emergency meeting room at Earth's military headquarters. It was 2 a.m, but her blue uniform looked perfect. Behind her, the big screens on the wall showed a map of the Kytherian star system. Red warning symbols covered the entire area, like a disease. The room was full of Earth's most important military leaders. They had been woken up from their beds and called to this urgent meeting. Most of them looked tired and confused. They didn't understand why they were here talking about some alien species they'd never heard of. The entire galactic community has given up on them, Admiral Stone said, pointing to the screens. I've been in contact with every major alien government. The Altarian Republic told me the Kytherians are just acceptable losses in some bigger war. The Centauri Alliance won't even return our messages about it. General Thomas Webb, the head of all military operations, looked at the data scrolling across the screens. He was an older man who had spent 40 years in the military. He believed in being practical and not taking unnecessary risks. Admiral, he said slowly, help me understand this. You're telling me that civilizations thousands of years more advanced than us have all decided this fight can't be won. What exactly makes us think we can succeed where they've given up? Stone's jaw got tight. She had expected this question, but it still made her angry. She thought about the desperate voice they had heard in that transmission. She thought about the children that alien commander had mentioned. Because we're human, sir, she said firmly. We don't abandon people who need help. That's not who we are. The room got quiet. Some of the officers looked uncomfortable. They knew she was right, but they also knew how dangerous this could be. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for 20 years. They were still considered newcomers, and most alien species didn't take humans seriously. But Admiral, spoke up Colonel Patricia Morgan, what do we actually know about this enemy? What are we going up against? Stone pressed a button on her control pad. The screens changed to show grainy images of the wrecked ships. They looked like nightmare creatures made of metal and flesh. Long tentacles hung from their sides, and their hulls pulsed like they were breathing. The wreck swarm, Stone explained. According to the reports we've gathered from other species, they're unlike anything we've ever seen. They don't just conquer planets. They eat them. They consume every living thing and leave nothing but dead rock behind. She pressed another button. Now the screen showed before and after pictures of Rex attacks. Beautiful alien worlds with blue oceans and green continents. Then the same planets as brown, lifeless spheres. They move like a plague across the galaxy, Stone continued. No one knows where they come from or what they really want. They just appear, destroy everything, and move on to the next target. General Webb shook his head. Catherine, I understand the moral argument, but we're talking about sending our people to fight something that has destroyed 17 civilizations. We might lose every ship we send. And if we do nothing, Stone shot back, we'll have to live with knowing we let millions of innocent people die when we could have tried to help. The argument went on for 2 hours. Some officers wanted to send just 1 or 2 ships to investigate. Others thought they should ask permission from the Galactic Council first. A few believed they should stay out of alien business entirely. But Admiral Stone kept pushing. She had grown up reading stories about human heroes who risked everything to save others. She believed that was what made humanity special in a galaxy full of species that calculated everything based on profit and loss. Finally, General Webb made the decision. We'll authorize a rescue mission. Small fleet, volunteer crews only. If this goes wrong, Earth can't be held responsible for starting some kind of galactic war. Within 6 hours, every human military base in the solar system was buzzing with activity. Engineers worked around the clock to prepare ships for a journey into unknown space. Supply officers loaded extra food, medical equipment, and ammunition. Captain Mitchell found himself in command of 12 ships. Everything Earth could spare for the mission. His small crew on the Defiance had doubled overnight as volunteers came forward. There were all kinds of people, young soldiers looking for adventure, experienced officers who believed in doing the right thing, and specialists who wanted to study this new threat. Dr. Rachel Foster was one of the volunteers who insisted on joining the mission. She was a xenobiologist who had spent her career studying alien life forms. When she heard about the Vrex, she knew she had to see them for herself. The Vrex are described as a hive mind, she explained to all the ship captains during their final briefing. That means they all think as one giant brain. They don't have individual personalities or fears like we do. They just consume and move on. She showed them more pictures of Vrex creatures. Some looked like giant insects. Others were more like sea monsters with too many teeth. They consume entire biospheres, she continued. Plants, animals, even the bacteria in the soil. They leave nothing alive. No species has ever successfully fought them and won. Captain David Reynolds, who commanded the UNSC Vengeance, crossed his arms and smiled grimly. He was a younger officer who had earned his reputation fighting space pirates. Good thing we're not like other species, he said. We humans have a long history of winning fights we weren't supposed to win. The human fleet suddenly appeared in the Kytherian star system after their long journey through hyperspace. What they saw made every crew member's heart sink. It was like arriving at a funeral that was still happening. Massive alien ships surrounded the crystal planet of New Kythera. These weren't normal spaceships made of metal and technology. The Vrex vessels looked alive, like giant sea creatures swimming through space. Their hulls pulsed and breathed. Tentacles as long as city blocks hung from their sides, grabbing chunks of debris and pulling them into massive mouths lined with teeth. The planet below was already dying. What had once been a beautiful world covered in crystal cities now looked like someone had been throwing rocks at it for weeks. Huge craters dotted the surface where Vrex bioweapons had struck. Fires burned in the crystal spires, sending columns of smoke into the atmosphere. "Dear God," whispered Pilot Officer Susan Clark from inside her small fighter craft. She was supposed to be flying reconnaissance, but all she could do was stare at the enemy's ships. Look at the size of those things. The largest Vrex bio ship was easily 10 times bigger than any human vessel. Its surface was covered in what looked like scales, and every few seconds it would open massive ports along its sides to launch smaller attack creatures into space. Captain Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Defiance, trying to process what he was seeing. In all his years of space exploration, he had never witnessed anything like this. It wasn't just a battle, it was extermination. "Sir," Lieutenant Hayes said quietly, "we're picking up massive life sign readings from those ships. The Vrex aren't using machines to fight. Those ships are the Vrex." Mitchell nodded grimly and opened a communication channel to the planet. He hoped someone down there was still alive to hear him. Commander Veltar was huddled in the emergency command center deep beneath New Kythera's capital city. Around him, the few remaining Kytherian soldiers worked frantically at their stations. Every few minutes, the whole bunker would shake as another Vrex weapon hit the surface above them. Veltar's crystalline body had lost most of its glow. His people changed color based on their emotions, and right now he was a dark gray of despair. The Vrex ground forces had just broken through the last defensive barrier, protecting the civilian shelters. In a few hours, maybe less, his entire species would be extinct. That's when the human voice crackled through the communication system. "This is Captain Mitchell of the United Earth Coalition. We received your distress call, beginning immediate evacuation of civilians." Veltar's body flashed bright with shock and hope. He grabbed the microphone with shaking hands. You came, but you're from a quarantined sector. All the warnings said your species was dangerous and primitive." Mitchell's voice came back through the static, rough and determined. "Forget the warnings. How many people can you get to the evacuation zones?" What happened next changed everything Veltar thought he knew about warfare. He had studied military history for decades. He knew how civilized species fought, with honor, following established rules, maintaining proper formations. The humans threw all of that out the window. Instead of approaching in a neat battle line like every other species would do, the human ships scattered in all directions. Some dove toward the planet's surface. Others disappeared behind the system's asteroid belt. A few actually flew straight into the debris field created by destroyed Kytherian ships. "What are they doing?" asked one of Veltar's officers. "They're breaking every rule of space combat." On the Defiance, Lieutenant Hayes was coordinating the attack like he was conducting an orchestra of chaos. His tactical display showed 12 human ships moving in patterns that made no sense to traditional military thinking. "Wraith Squadron, I want you to hit that big bio-ship's belly section," he called out over the radio. "Phoenix Wing, draw their fire toward the debris field. Make them think you're retreating." "Copy that, Lieutenant," came the reply from Squadron Leader Tom Bradley. "We're going in." The Vrex had been fighting this war for months. They were used to prey that either ran away in terror or fought back with predictable tactics. They expected their enemies to surrender when the odds became impossible or to die with dignity when defeat was certain. Humans did neither. Captain Reynolds in the Vengeance led his ship on a suicide run straight to the center of the Vrex formation. Any sane commander would have tried to maintain distance and use long-range weapons. Instead, Reynolds got so close to the enemy bio-ships that his crew could see individual Vrex creatures crawling across their hulls. "Sir, we're taking massive damage," reported his tactical officer. "Hull integrity is down to 60%. "Perfect," Reynolds grinned. "That means we're close enough." The Vrex had evolved to hunt species that thought like civilized beings. They understood fear, retreat, and logical decision-making. But they had never encountered anything like humans, creatures from a death world who had spent millions of years learning to survive against impossible odds. When cornered, most species would surrender or die quietly. Humans got angry and started fighting dirty. Pilot Officer Clark dove her fighter through a gap between two Vrex tentacles, firing at soft spots in their armor. When her weapons ran out of ammunition, she used her ship itself as a weapon, ramming into sensor clusters and weapon ports. "This is insane," she laughed over the radio as she pulled out of another impossible maneuver. "And it's working." Down on the planet, Veltar watched in amazement as the tide of battle began to turn. The Vrex, for the first time since he had known them, seemed confused. Their perfect coordination was breaking down as they tried to respond to human tactics that made no logical sense. "They're fighting like wild animals," one of his officers observed. "No," Veltar corrected, his crystal body beginning to glow brighter with hope. "They're fighting like something the Vrex have never encountered before. They're fighting like survivors." Dr. Rachel Foster's hand shook as she examined the Vrex tissue sample under her microscope. She had set up a temporary laboratory in the cargo bay of the Defiance, working while the ship rocked from explosions outside. Around her, medical supplies and scientific equipment were strapped down to prevent them from flying around during combat maneuvers. The sample she was studying had come from a Vrex creature that human fighters had managed to kill. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The tissue was part animal, part plant, and part something else entirely. It seemed to repair itself even after death, and it pulsed with its own internal energy. "Captain," she called over the ship's communication system, "you need to hear this." Mitchell's voice crackled back through the speakers. He sounded tired and stressed. "What have you found, Doctor?" Foster looked at her readings again, hardly believing what she was seeing. "Sir, the Vrex aren't just predators hunting for food. There's something much worse. They're a perfect killing machine that's been designed to consume everything in their path." She pulled up her analysis on the computer screen. The data showed biological systems that couldn't have evolved naturally. Someone or something had created the Vrex to be the ultimate destroyers. But they have one major weakness. Foster continued, getting excited despite the danger around them. They expect their prey to behave logically. Every species they fought before has followed predictable patterns. When faced with superior force, civilized beings either surrender or retreat in an organized way. The Vrex have learned to counter every logical response. "And humans don't behave logically," Mitchell said, understanding immediately. "Exactly, sir. We're the first species they've encountered that fights like we have nothing to lose." Captain Reynolds had already figured this out on his own. His ship, the Vengeance, was currently racing through an asteroid field at speeds that should have been impossible. Behind him, 6 massive Rex bioships gave chase, their tentacles reaching out to grab his vessel. "Sir, this is completely insane," shouted Engineer Officer Nancy Wright from her station. Warning lights flashed all around her as the ship's system struggled to keep up with Reynolds' demands. "We're at 40% hull integrity. One more hit and we'll break apart." Reynolds grinned as he steered the ship between 2 spinning asteroids, each one larger than the city. "Perfect. That means we're right where we want to be." His crew had spent the last hour turning their ship into a weapon. Sergeant Major Andrew Scott, the ship's toughest soldier, had personally overseen the modifications to the reactor core. They had removed all the safety systems and rigged it to explode on command. "Sergeant Major," Reynolds called out, "are we ready for the big finale?" Scott nodded grimly. He was a man who had fought in Earth's worst conflicts, but even he had never attempted anything this crazy. "Reactors primed, sir. When we blow it, it'll take out everything within 10 kilometers." The Vrex ships behind them couldn't understand what was happening. In their experience, prey animals ran away to save themselves. They didn't lead their hunters into increasingly dangerous situations. The bioships kept following, using their superior size and firepower to herd the human vessel toward what they thought would be its destruction. "They think they're hunting us." Reynolds laughed as alarms blared around him. "They have no idea we're hunting them." When Reynolds finally triggered the reactor explosion, it created a chain reaction that tore through the asteroid field. The blast destroyed not only the Vengeance, but also half of the Vrex pursuit fleet. The surviving bioships retreated in confusion, unable to process what had just happened. Down on the planet's surface, Colonel Patricia Morgan was leading a very different kind of impossible mission. She had landed with 200 human soldiers to help evacuate Kytherian civilians from the capital city. What was supposed to be a simple rescue operation had turned into a running battle through the crystal streets. The Vrex ground forces were unlike anything in human military manuals. They looked like giant spiders crossed with sharks, each one the size of a tank. They moved in perfect coordination, never making mistakes, never showing fear or hesitation. Morgan's soldiers, on the other hand, were chaos in human form. They had been trained in Earth's most dangerous environments, Arctic wastelands, burning deserts, deep jungles, and high mountains. They knew how to fight when everything went wrong, when plans fell apart, and when survival seemed impossible. "Bravo Squad, fall back to Cathedral," Morgan radioed to her troops. "Charlie Squad, lay down covering fire from the crystal formations." Private Jake Wilson crouched behind a fallen spire, reloading his rifle as Vrex creatures scuttled toward him. "Colonel, these things don't fight like anything we've seen before. They don't take cover. They don't retreat. They just keep coming." "That's their weakness, Wilson," Morgan replied, ducking as a Vrex weapon blast shattered the crystal wall above her head. "They think war is just about being bigger and stronger. They've never fought an enemy that refuses to give up." She watched as her soldiers used tactics that would have horrified any military academy instructor. They split into tiny groups and attacked from multiple directions. They used the environment against their enemies, bringing down crystal structures to crush Vrex creatures. When they ran out of ammunition, they used explosives. When they ran out of explosives, they used anything they could find as weapons. Sergeant Lisa Chun had armed herself with a broken piece of crystal the size of a baseball bat. She was leading a group of Kytherian children through the ruins, fighting off Vrex scouts with nothing but determination and fury. "The Vrex think in terms of consumption and efficiency," Morgan radioed back to Captain Mitchell. "They calculate odds and make logical decisions. They don't understand spite. They don't understand fighting just because it's the right thing to do." As the evacuation continued, something strange began to happen. The Vrex, for the first time in their existence, started making mistakes. Their perfect coordination broke down as they tried to respond to human tactics that made no sense. Some bioships pulled back when they should have advanced. Others wasted ammunition on targets that weren't really there. Dr. Foster, still analyzing samples in her makeshift laboratory, realized what was happening. "Captain," she called out excitedly, "the hive mind is getting confused. They've never encountered prey that fights back this effectively. Their decision-making process is starting to break down." The humans weren't just winning battles. They were teaching the galaxy's most perfect predators something they had never experienced before. What it felt like to be afraid. 3 weeks had passed since the first human ship arrived at New Kythera. The crystal planet that had been covered in smoke and fire now sparkled again under its 3 suns. The last Rex Bio ship had fled the system 2 days ago, its massive form disappearing into hyperspace like a nightmare finally ending. For the first time in their history, the Vrex had retreated. The hive mind that had consumed 17 civilizations had encountered something it couldn't understand or defeat. Humans weren't just another prey species. They were predators from a death world who fought with a fury that scared even the galaxy's most perfect killers. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking out at the rescue ships that filled the space around his planet. Thousands of Kytherian refugees were being loaded onto vessels bound for safer systems. His crystalline body glowed with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. The human ship's bridge was still cramped and noisy, so different from the elegant vessels his people built. But Veltar had learned that sometimes the roughest tools were most effective. These humans had saved his entire species with nothing but determination and a willingness to fight impossible odds. Your species fought a battle the entire galaxy said was impossible, Veltar said to Captain Mitchell, who stood nearby watching the evacuation. I've studied warfare for decades, and what you did here defies every military principle I know. Why did you do it? Mitchell rubbed his tired eyes. He hadn't slept properly in weeks, and his weathered face showed every hour of the stress. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, still processing what they had accomplished. Because someone needed help, Mitchell said simply, as if that explained everything. Veltar's crystal body flickered with confusion. But you risked everything. Your government didn't order this mission. You had no guarantee of success. You could have all died for nothing. Mitchell looked out at the refugee ships again. Each one carried families that would have been extinct if the humans hadn't answered that desperate call for help. Where we come from, Mitchell said slowly, we have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We heard your call, and we couldn't do nothing. Meanwhile, Dr. Rachel Foster was working in her laboratory, but now she was studying something far more important than Vrex biology. She was analyzing the political implications of what had just happened. Her computer screen showed communication intercepts from across the galaxy, and what she was reading would change everything. Captain, she called out, excitement clear in her voice, you need to see this. The galactic community was in chaos. For centuries, advanced civilizations had dismissed humanity as primitive and dangerous. They had quarantined Earth and labeled it a death world full of violent savages. Now those same civilizations were scrambling to understand how these primitive humans had done what they couldn't. The Altarian Republic, one of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful governments, had sent their first official message to Earth within days of the Vrex retreat. Their previous position had been that humans were too dangerous to interact with. Now, their message was very different. The High Council wishes to discuss mutual defense agreements with the United Earth Coalition, the diplomatic transmission read. We believe our civilizations could benefit from closer cooperation. Similar messages were flooding in from across the galaxy. Species that had never even acknowledged humanity's existence were suddenly very interested in becoming friends. The Centauri Alliance, which had refused to help the Kytherians, was now offering trade agreements. The Vegan Confederacy wanted to establish embassies. Back on Earth, Admiral Catherine Stone read through the diplomatic requests with a mixture of satisfaction and amusement. 3 weeks ago, these same governments had called the Kytherians acceptable losses. Now, they were begging for human protection. Captain Reynolds was recovering in the medical bay of a hospital ship, his body covered in bandages from an explosion that had destroyed his vessel. He had been lucky to survive the reactor detonation that had taken out half the Vrex fleet. When a nurse told him about all the diplomatic requests Earth was receiving, he started laughing so hard it hurt his broken ribs. Funny how fast they want to be friends now, he said. A month ago, we were dangerous primitives they wanted nothing to do with. Now we're their best hope for survival. Lieutenant Hayes, who had been promoted to commander after battle, was already coordinating humanity's response to crisis. His desk was covered with requests for help from other species facing Vrex attacks. Each message carried the same desperate tone that had first brought them to New Kythera. "Sir," Hayes reported to Admiral Stone, "we're getting requests for assistance from 14 different star systems. The Vrex are spreading across the galaxy faster than anyone expected." Stone nodded grimly. She had known this would happen. The battle at New Kythera had proved that the Vrex could be defeated, but it also revealed how widespread their threat really was. "How many ships can we deploy?" she asked. "Not enough," Hayes admitted, "but we'll do what we can." The Kytherians became humanity's first official alien allies. Their crystal cities were now protected by human defense platforms, and their scientists worked alongside human researchers to develop new weapons against the Vrex. But more importantly, they became living proof of what humans were willing to do for strangers. Veltar often told the story to his children in the years that followed. He would gather them around in the evenings and tell them about the day their species almost died and how salvation came from the most unexpected source. "We cry for help across the void," he would say, his crystal body glowing with the warmth of memory, expecting silence or perhaps sympathy from the civilized races. Instead, we found monsters from a death world who chose to be heroes. The children would always ask the same question: "Why did they help us, Father?" And Veltar would always give the same answer: "Because that's what humans do. When someone needs help, they don't calculate odds or consider profit. They just help." The galaxy would never be the same. The age of the Vrex was ending, and the age of humanity was just beginning. And it all started with a simple decision to answer a cry for help from strangers in the dark.